Well, hello there. I am Tanya. I am an MST therapist with North Range Behavioral Health. MST is the multi-systemic therapy. We're one of the evidence-based, home-based models where we work with families and do some really good work. We're just one of the many options that North Range has. So the service that I really focus on in my normal job is just relational and behavioral work with families. Our primary client, we work with adolescents. So our program's intended to support youth to remain in the community with their families. We really try and work as much as possible to empower our caregivers, support them in building skills and strategies to really try and intervene in some of those behavioral issues that we have sometimes. As an MST therapist, a portion of my work, I do a lot of work supporting families and partnering with other agencies in the community. So we work with the juvenile justice system, we work with Department of Human Services, child welfare, other community resources. So we try and do a little bit of everything because we want to be there to fully support the family. So I'm hoping the time we spend together today can provide you with some ideas to how to better support your kiddos and your family. I'm going to talk a little bit about boundaries and some of those benefits that we can get. Never too late. Just keep that in mind, okay? So first and foremost, since it is a coffee break, let's do that. Let's take a drink of our coffee. I need it too. Because I know if I don't have my morning routine of having my coffee, setting in my workspace, just doing the day-to-day things, I get thrown off. Not only do I get thrown off, sometimes I get to be a little bit cranky. Not always the best thing, nor does it really help have a productive work day, or even just a fun day if it's the weekend. So why am I mentioning that? Why does it matter? Well, that's boundaries, that's structure. Our kids need that. All right. It's intrinsic motivation that I've developed as an adult, and ideally what happens when we, as parents or caregivers, when we do this for our families, that's where we start developing that intrinsic motivation. So when they are adults, they are able to be like, oh, I know what I need to do. It's a really, really, really hard thing for kiddos right now to have that intrinsic motivation. So usually we kind of got to help them out a little bit with that. Okay. So, So let's kind of think back to when we were raising the kiddos when they were babies and toddlers. Well, we set boundaries then, right? We would go through, we'd baby-proof our house, we'd watch the sharp corners, make sure the outlets are covered. We're very careful about making sure, if you have animals, that they're taken care of, the food's put up. We don't just trust the kids not to do what they're not supposed to do, right? They don't know. How do they know? Because we teach them and we set those boundaries. Same thing as they get older. Riding the bike. Okay, you can ride up and down the driveway. Okay, you can ride up and down the street, but I have to be able to see you. Pretty soon you're allowing them to go around the block or maybe even ride their bike to school, right? Again, we're setting those boundaries so they can test and learn and grow. They've got to have some wiggle room there. Okay? So, if we're thinking school, I mentioned riding the bike to school. What happens at school? There's a schedule, there's boundaries. They're in their classroom, they have, their schedule. They know in the morning meeting, some schools, they do like a carpet time, I guess is what they actually called it in my niece's school. Everybody in the class would come sit down in the morning and they'd have their little morning meeting. This is what we're doing today. Tell us something positive. Just kind of getting us geared up for the day, right? It kind of set that structure, those boundaries of what we're looking for. Again, we move on from elementary school up to middle school, high school, boundaries. We know we have a class period from this time to this time. We have a specific schedule. We know what the expectations are. They're very clear. We know what happens if we meet those expectations or if we don't meet those expectations. Okay? As they get older, high school age, they're learning to drive. Well, how do they do that? Again, it's a step by step. They take their tests, they have to do driver's ed sometimes, they get their permit first and foremost. Here in Colorado, they have to do so many hours of this type of driving and this type of driving before they just get their license. Well, what is that? That's boundaries. That's giving them a little bit of freedom, making sure they're comfortable with it, allowing them to be able to grow and change and earn those privileges before they get the driver's license. Same thing as families. How do we do that, right? We want to make sure, number one, it's developmentally appropriate. We don't just toss them into the deep end of the ocean if they don't swim, right? Not very smart. However, we want to make sure that we are challenging them enough so we are allowing them space to grow and to figure out who they are. Who are they going to be as adults? Who are they as teenagers? Because that's a big thing. They're still trying to figure that out, right? So a lot of the examples that I give, it's going to be primarily around adolescence, mainly because that's who I work with. That being said, it doesn't mean it excludes any particular age range. Boundaries are very important for any and everyone. Even as adults, we need those boundaries. Okay? So when I talk developmentally appropriateness, the reason this is really important is because as teenagers, as kids, the brains are still developing. That means that frontal part of their brain where they're able to think logically, where they're able to think long-term, really do the pro-con of consequences, or do the benefits outweigh the possible cost, those type of things. That's still being developed. They don't always have access to it. Teenagers are very much in the here and now. This is what I want. This is what I'm focused on. Gimme, right? However, if we're consistent as parents, as caregivers, we're able to try and shape some of that. Okay? So, what does that mean? I'll get there. All right. So, what do we need to grow, right? For anybody to grow, to change, to continue to develop, they need a sense of safety, right? Boundaries will help you set that term of safety. We know, number one concern, we want our kids to be safe. We want them to be healthy. We want them to be smart, productive human beings, right? So how do we do, this in our own home? And unfortunately, a lot of times when people think safety, it means, there's something dangerous. The opposite of safety is dangerous. It's more than that. Do the kids feel safe and confident that they can come and talk to you if something's going on? Are there some predictable things going on in a positive way so they're not in that constant, hey, I got to have my backup and I don't know what's going to come next, as a hard way to grow and to figure out who you are. So safety is stability. Think about that. Are things stable? Are we having responses rather than reactions, right? Are we thinking about what we're going to say and how we're going to respond to something? Part of safety and stability being established is establishing very, very clear and concrete expectations, right? That means having very clear and concrete contingencies. And I use contingencies because we want kids to be able to earn privileges. We want kids to be able to have reward. Like I said, that intrinsic motivation's probably not quite there yet, which is normal. So how do we do that? Well, that's where we can pull in those contingencies so they have that external motivation going on, right? And then consistency. Consistency is key, right? No matter what it is, be consistent with it. If you're saying curfew is 10 o'clock, that means curfew is 10 o'clock. Now, does that mean it's the end all be all, it's written in concrete and stone and it's not changing? No. Ideally, it means the expectation is you're home by 10. If you're not home by 10, X, Y, or Z can happen. If they, meaning your teenager, if they have that security and safety with you and they know they can communicate, they can call and say, hey, I'm running a little bit late, I'll be home at 10:30, whatever it may be. Granted, there may still be a consequence with that, and there's still that safety component where they know they're not gonna, the top's not gonna blow off if for some reason they are running late, because life happens. We all know that. We get caught by a train, car breaks down, any millions of different things, which makes it even more important to have communication. That's a whole other story. I'm getting off topic. Okay, so with safety, we want the kids, like I said, to be able to have this opportunity to grow and to change. It's a scary time, right? Life's scary enough without having to add in the inconsistency of what does it mean at home. So what that means is if we're looking at like a power of choice, right? Again, if we're really clear on our expectations, if we're really clear on our contingencies, and we're being consistent with that, that gives us a little bit of room, right? Gives us, and the kids, I should say, a little bit of room. Kids do well with control. They need to feel a sense of control. Oftentimes if you're having a kiddo having a behavior, it's a way that they feel uncertain. They're in a bit of chaos, and that may be a strong word, but they're trying to do something to get their control back, right? By offering these expectations ahead of time, having them clear, being consistent with it, they have that power of choice, and therefore they have that opportunity to grow and choose. And with that power of choice comes those natural consequences. Got to allow those to happen. Not only, like I said, we've got those, external motivations of the contingencies, but sometimes natural consequences means, not getting to participate in something at school because, they miss, they're an athlete. They miss practice because of not a great reason. Maybe they just didn't feel like going. Well, maybe the coach is going to have that natural consequence for them. They don't get to play at the next game. So that's a natural consequence when you're viewing it at home. If you're thinking about when you drive, natural consequence of speeding, we get a speeding ticket if we get caught, which means our insurance goes up, right? Natural consequence. It happens. We've got to let our kids experience that because sometimes that's the only way they're going to learn. We can try and prepare them as much as possible, and they still have to be able to experience it to know that, yes, it does happen. So one thing I want you to kind of think about in terms of when we're setting boundaries with kiddos and we're thinking of some of those benefits, think of a time where you had a job and you had a manager. Maybe we had somebody that's like a micromanager. They are in everything and they nitpick everything, and you have very, very little room to move at all because they're just right there. So that's kind of like what they talk about as helicopter parenting. Rebecca, my colleague, actually did a talk a couple of weeks ago and kind of talks about that a little bit there. So be sure to check that out. On the flip, and let's kind of stick with the micromanaging a little bit. I know when I had a micromanager in my job, not this one, when I was in retail, I was not very happy. I didn't talk to her about what was going on. I minimized any kind of contact with her at all. Same thing kind of happens with kids, right? If they feel like they're being micromanaged and they can't move, can't breathe, they don't have any of that freedom, any of that choice to have some of their own control, that's going to kind of push them away a little bit. So think about it too this way. If we have a manager, and people do differently with different types of managerial styles. I totally get that. More often than not, managers that are firm but fair do well, and the employees do well, right? They know there are potential consequences to actions, to things going on, and there's still that communication going on where there's some empathy. So we want to have empathy for our kids. Don't forget that. They're people too. But we want to allow them a chance to grow, to do their thing, to stay within the boundaries that are there. Again, clear, consistent. You're going to get tired of me saying it. I say it all the time. It is so, so important. But just kind of going that direction. Help them make an informed choice, I guess, is the best way of saying it. we want to have them to have opportunities for success. If you're micromanaging and hovering, it's really hard for them to have an opportunity for success because it's already mapped out for them. If we give them a little bit of room, a little bit of space within our boundaries, that gives them a chance to grow, it gives them a chance to shine, and it gives them a chance to really, continue to develop who they are. In boundaries, be sure to avoid a power struggle. It's not, going back and forth of, no, I want to do this, no, you can't do this, you're not going to that concert, I don't care. Doesn't really get anywhere other than a bit of conflict, right? Have communication, have conversation, and hey, these are the boundaries, these are the expectations, here's potential consequences. Again, give the kids power of choice and have them make an informed choice. What does it mean if they make that choice? Good and bad. Also, don't personalize their choice. If the kids aren't doing the greatest, or if they're having some behaviors, it's not about you. I know how it can feel that way because we are so entrenched and we want our kids to do so well that it's really easy to do that. However, we got to remember the kids aren't operating up here yet. They're making that choice, right? They're having this behavior, they're doing it, they're making those decisions, and you have to make that decision to hold them accountable so they know those boundaries are there for a reason and you mean it. You're being consistent with it. Trust but verify. That's another big thing. When setting boundaries, use your resources. Use your family members. Use the school. Get a link going with the school. Again, these things have been talked about already, so I don't want to harp on it too much. Within our other Coffee with the Counselors, with my other MST therapist. But kind of keep those things in mind. Most importantly, with boundaries, kind of think of the bubble of freedom, right? I'm going to steal this from Rebecca's because I think this is so accurate when we're thinking boundaries. As babies, there's a pretty tight bubble of freedom, right? We don't just let them toddle about and go outside and do what they want, right? They're not ready for that. Same thing with teens. We want to set this boundary, and based on their choices and how they manage and handle that freedom that they do have, maybe we can expand that bubble just a little bit. At the same time, if they don't handle that freedom as successfully as we would like, we can contract that freedom a little bit. So you want to, adjust that bubble as the behaviors dictate. Kind of like I said at the beginning, it's never too late to start. Don't give up hope. Oh, this is so hard. It can be challenging, and that's where it's really important to bring in communication. I always use the example of, there's a new stoplight that's going to be implemented at the intersection. Well, how do we know that? Well, it starts with clear communication. We have the signs. Sometimes it even starts with the collaboration from the neighborhood, the police. There's a lot of accidents going on, all of that good stuff. So there's already that communication talking about, hey, is it needed? Then the signs, hey, this is going to happen. There's some advanced warning, trial run of, okay, let's give this a shot, see how it goes. Let's tweak it as necessary. And then have a firm date of, okay, starting at this point in time, this is how it is. So just kind of be prepared for that. Most importantly, have empathy for your kids. Like I said, your kids are people too. They just have less experience at it. And not only are they struggling with school and family and siblings if possible, extracurricular stuff, friends, a million different things, right? And the pandemic. Goodness knows everyone's dealing with that right now. But think of yourself at that age. Would you be able to handle all of this without any incident? Probably not. All of us have bumps in the road, and that's perfectly okay. Just remember, they're kids, they're people. They're little pieces of you. Have some empathy for them. They're still trying to figure everything out. That's where modeling comes in. So kind of think about that too. One thing to consider is the better communication there is, the more openness, the easier it's going to be for everyone, right? Think about the manager thing. How do you work best? Your kids are probably pretty similar. So it looks like I am about out of time. Thank you so much on behalf of myself and the MST team, as well as North Range, for tuning in for Coffee with a Counselor. Next week, my teammate Leslie is going to be talking about intentional parenting, and I think it's going to tune very well in with Thanksgiving being next week as well. If you haven't already, Rebecca and Eric did some talking earlier about staying connected, systemic parenting, and Teen Speak, so how to talk to your kids. So be sure to go on and Northridge's page and check it out. And most importantly, if you or someone you know is experiencing a behavioral health emergency, please reach out. We have crisis counselors available 24/7. You can call 970-347-2120. You can text TALK, TALK, to 38255, or walk into our crisis center at 928 12th Street in Greeley. Thank you so much. Have a good day.